All right. So, Dustin, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks. I'm glad to be here and chat with you guys.
Yeah, I think the first time I ever found out about Dustin was I was on Instagram. I saw one of our photos in a post, and I was like, "Hey, man, you can't use our photo." And he's like, "I'm sorry, I didn't know." And I'm like, "It's fine, just give us credit." But that was how I first found out about Lab Rat Run, which then I became fascinated with. Because if you don't know Dustin, you should check him out. Lab Rat Run is the
Lab Rat
Instagram.
Rundown or Lab Rat Run?
Rundown.
Rundown.
Well, I have to get it correct, otherwise people won't find it. But Lab Rat Rundown on Instagram, and you started posting some of the results from studies. So if you could maybe talk to us a little bit about, like, one, how you got started with that, and two, how you decided to start putting those results on Instagram.
Yeah, sure. So, hey, in my defense, I tagged the photo. I just didn't tag the post. I'm an Instagram noob. At least I definitely was a couple months ago. So,
Don't worry, I think that's
tried
how we
to give photo credit. I just didn't do it right.
I think that's how we became friends with Ben Johnson as
Yeah.
well. So it all worked out in the end.
So actually, the kind of my foray into social media was a big step for me. I always joke I'm an elder millennial, so it's like Facebook started when I was in college, and that's the only social media platform I've been on. So I don't really. I have a lurking Twitter account, I guess, but I did the same on Instagram for a long time. But yeah, we started doing some shoe testing in my lab at Stephen F. Austin State University, and we did a larger project. And I was like, well, this is the kind of stuff. There tends to be a disconnect between science and like what's in academic journals and translating that to the average person. And it just seems like with this running shoe research, it's like a good opportunity that there's a lot of average people who are interested in it. And the running shoe content that is on social media already is like, a big platform for people kind of sharing that. And so I thought it would be sort of a good line of research to kind of share on the Instagram space.
Yeah. So, like, what can you give our listeners a little bit of a rundown of what you're doing on your Instagram space, kind of what your passion is regarding shoes and testing them and everything?
Yeah, so I joke that I'm just like a dumb guy with a metabolic cart. So in an exercise physiology lab, people are probably familiar with different like physiological testing that gets done and from an endurance performance standpoint, right? So people,
VO2,
maybe go on and get their VO2 max tested at a lab, or they get their lactate threshold tested at a lab. So we can do that kind of stuff in our human performance lab here. But the other kind of big piece of endurance performance, running performance, would be running economy, which is essentially how much oxygen it takes or how much energy it takes to run at a given speed. And ideally, you want to be more economical, meaning that you take less energy or less oxygen to work at a given speed. And in turn, that allows you to run faster at the same physiological intensity. So you basically get more MPGs out of your car, right?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the line of research with the new shoes. The research that dates back to like 2017 with the Vaporfly prototypes. Giving you a 4% benefit in running economy. That's the type of metabolic testing that they were doing. So when you see somebody on like the Gatorade commercial with the mask on and they're measuring oxygen consumption, we're able to indirectly determine energy expenditure that way. And so that's more or less what like I've been sharing on Instagram, whether it be from our larger like published studies or from just case study stuff, testing I've done on myself. So everybody's got like their N=1 subjective opinion about shoes. And so now I've got, some N=1 objective data kind of using the gold standard testing equipment.
What I love about it, and obviously you're putting science behind it, but you just said everybody's got their subjective opinion about it. And so far, you've backed up all my opinions. So I'm like, this is a shoe that's easier to run in. And it's weird because, one thing I want to ask you about is, I've always said, if your max pace is X versus somebody else's max pace at X, the shoes still help you run more efficiently for the most part. Have you found that to be true? Like, so say that my race pace is a 7:39 and, Robbie's here for marathon's going to be 7:20 something. We're both going to see the same type of benefit from that as an athlete who's like, say, running a sub 2:20 marathon. We're still seeing it might be a greater effect, but we're getting the same help out of the shoes as they are, aren't we?
Yeah, so if you look at the published research lit to date, there's a handful of published super shoe studies now, mostly on the Vaporfly line, and then our larger comparison study that we did with multiple shoes. But most of that research in terms of like fixed speeds that have been tested at are like 13 to 14 kilometers per hour and faster. So like 7-minute mile pace and faster. So in those results have kind of shown, independent of speed, the percent benefit you get is similar. So from 7-minute mile pace up to like 520 mile pace in the faster studies that have looked at a range of speeds. But we haven't really seen research that has looked at slower speeds. So like 730 pace and slower, there's really not any published lit. We just got done with a project, and I can share the abstract with you because I've got some students presenting that research abstract at one of our regional conferences this Thursday, actually.
Oh, cool.
But they've posted those abstracts online. So that's just a research abstract. It says hasn't gone through like full peer review yet, but we've got that manuscript being drafted right now. And we looked at 8-minute mile pace, which would be like a 3:30 marathon, and we looked at what's the equivalent of like a 4:15 marathon. I think it's like
I think that's like above
9:45 pace.
9:30 or something.
We looked at 10 and 12 kilometers per hour, so it corresponds to like 3:30 to 4:15 marathoners. But I think that's a great question. That's one of the questions we've had is like, should your average runners be interested in these shoes, and if they are, what kind of benefits are they getting? And what we saw in that most recent study, we looked at 16 runners, 8 men, 8 women, and the benefits were more around like 1.5% for the Vaporfly compared to our control shoe that we use at the 8-minute mile per hour speed. So for like your 3:30 marathoner, and a little bit less so, even like a little bit less than 1% at like the 9:40 pace.
Really?
I think like theory there, I'm working with actually a biomechanist who's helping with kind of some of the theory behind that. I'm a physiologist, not a biomechanist. So I think, if you're loading the foam up less, you've got less ground reaction forces. It's kind of like that you're loading the spring less. Maybe that explains some of that we've observed. So that when we get that paper out, hopefully, let's see if we get the preprint out of it like we did with the last paper. That'll be out hopefully here soon. As it works its way through like peer review, but that would be the first study that I'm aware of that's actually like got published data on slower speeds.
Okay.
No, that's not to say 1.5% is still a very meaningful like benefit. That's for a 3:30 marathoner. That's still going to give you. I don't have the calculations right in front of me, but you're still getting probably 4 minutes or so of time benefit from that in a marathon.
I mean, and
then I think the other thing is we're looking like acutely at economy, like over a 5-minute trial. So if the shoe is the extra cushioning that you get from it is maybe causing less muscle damage over the course of a longer race, the benefits might be amplified beyond that.
That was the part that I was going to allude to, and I didn't know if you guys are doing any testing with that. One of the things that we think is a benefit to anybody wearing the shoe, especially even these faster, we're seeing records being broken now. And we, kind of in our mind are saying, hey, could it possibly be the recovery from these shoes now that we have more cushioning and a softer shoe and it's easier on your legs? Some of these athletes can train harder day after day without risk of injury because they're wearing a shoe that protects their legs a little bit better. And that is maybe even more so the key than just the race performance on the day, is that you're having, like say that Kira D'Amato, for example, is training in these shoes that have more cushioning. Her legs are feeling better. She can go out and push the pace more often, do harder workouts more often, and that kind of stuff. Is there anything that you guys are doing that would bring that into the equation?
Yeah, so we're not doing that work right now. That's a little bit to get into the realm of training studies where you got to like manipulate training and have this group running this shoe for 6 months and this group running this shoe for X months. Like you can see how those studies are really difficult to do. But I definitely think in theory that makes good sense, and from personal experience makes good sense. So I don't know that I would say more so that's how they're helping. I think that's going to play a role, and it definitely plays a factor. But I think you could have someone who hasn't trained in that shoe and you slap a 4% benefit shoe on them, they're going to immediately perform better independent of any lack of training they had done in that shoe. So I think I think there's probably both those angles are relevant.
I had wondered this for a while, and I wanted to kind of figure out how you do this in the lab. You are testing some pretty high-end shoes. We're talking about the Vaporfly, Alphafly, SP Sky, a lot of the carbon-plated shoes. How do you, I guess, get all those shoes? And do you use them like more than one time? Do you track how many miles are on each shoe? I'm assuming they're not all fresh for every, run that you do with athletes. So how does that work?
Yeah, so the first study that we did where we compared 7 different super shoes and 1 control shoe, I had like a $3,000 grant, an internal grant, and I was able to purchase, small run of sizes. We had 10, 10.5, 11 in men's shoes and those 8 shoes. And I have a whole buddy that I ran against in college who he runs Fleet Austin, Ari Perez. And so he was able to help me get acquire the shoes and then purchase some of them at cost to save some money.
Okay.
So he was a big help, and so I think I begged for like another $1,000 from my department chair on that study. So we got that study done for like $4K, and actually bought all the shoes, no partnerships with running shoe companies or anything.
Gotcha.
And then we just crowdfunded about $1,200 to purchase Vaporflies and control shoes in women's sizes for our last study. So it's kind of just nickel and diamond things like that. I've got some other internal money I'm trying to get right now because we want to do some stuff with spikes. But yeah, in terms of like tracking the mileage, so like in that last study we did where you've got 12 guys in those 8 different shoes. For the testing that we do, you only need like 2 reps in each shoe for 5 minutes. So a whole, like one of those subjects, I only need 10 minutes in a shoe. So you could run through a lot of people before you're even getting, 20, 30 kilometers on a shoe.
Okay.
But I did see that you did a Vaporfly, like how much did it maintain over time? I saw that and I love that because I honestly feel the original Vaporfly that came out did kind of die out after 200 miles. You started to feel some compression of the foam. But the Alphafly, definitely, I feel like you can run that into the ground pretty much, and your test, again, like proved that.
Yeah. So kind of to put a button on what Robbie was asking, I do keep track of like the mileage on our shoes, and at some point I'm gonna have to retire my like research line of shoes. I'm not exactly sure what like mileage that is, and start getting 50 miles plus on them probably. But because of the nature of like how the testing is done, they have a pretty decent shelf life for the testing we're doing.
Okay.
But yeah, so to Thomas's question, I haven't done. I need somebody to say if anybody's got a pair of Vaporfly size 10 that's got like a ton of miles on them, send them to me and I'll test the Vaporflies the same way I did the Alphafly. So
okay.
The Alphafly is like my personal race hard workout shoe. And so I've got an old pair of Alphaflies that have 300 miles on them now, and I'm just going to keep running them up. And then I've got like my pair that I reserved for just racing now. And so, yeah, when I got that new pair, I compared them to the old pair that had at that time, I think like 250 miles on them. And yeah, they were basically good as new. It was like 4.5% versus 4% or so. So, which is nice. I think I like asking the questions that like the average consumer is like, when do I need to spend another $300 on shoes and have my spouse get mad at me again, right? And it's like, okay, these are probably still doing all right for me. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see as I think the outsole wear is probably going to like be more critical than like that Zoom X foam breaking down just on its own. I think like pictures people have seen me of like beat up shoes. It's like once the outsole goes, then you start chewing up
Shred
all
it out.
midsole.
Yeah, and that's it. It's going to
But
depend
I think
on heel
the
striking and all
Alphafly, the Alphafly versus Vaporfly thing, you got the airbags in the Alphafly, so that's probably a little more like resilient over time than probably the foam is. So that might play a role if the Vaporflies feel like they're breaking down sooner.
I mean, I have 3 pairs of Alphafly, and that I rotate, that I still use all of them, and I can slightly tell like the difference between a little giddy up in the oldest pair versus the newest pair. But overall, like I could probably still race in all of them. Yeah,
and that's what the kind of running economy testing I did. A 4% pair, I'd still take those over any other shoe in my lineup than my,
So when we're talking about testing the shoes, I think we alluded to the fact that you showed the results and statistics on your Instagram, and it kind of aligns with what we think. Give us a rundown. What's the best race day shoe, or gives you the most, percentage boost, and then write down the line. I want, because I think our listeners would want to know.
Yeah, they would want to. I already know from watching the channel.
But for everyone who's listening, what have you found?
Yeah, so to go back to like our original, when I first kind of put some stuff out there on the Instagram space, was the preprint of our super shoe comparison study, where we looked at, what all did we look at? The Alphafly, the Vaporfly, the A6 Metaspeed Sky, and so those were kind of the top three in terms of, they were all kind of equally competitive in terms of giving you that around 3% or so running economy benefit. And we also looked at the Endorphin Pro from Saucony, the RC Elite from New Balance. Those were kind of mid-tier, around 1.5% benefit, but not quite as good as those.
The original
those
RC Elite, not the RC Elite.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, so this is the challenge with doing running shoe research in the academic sector, is we can't keep up with new shoe releases,
right.
Like, so for science to play its course, to obtain funding, to get the shoes, to get the subjects, to collect good data, write up the results, go through the peer review process. So like, I released a preprint of that paper back in mid-September, and it just got posted online actually today.
Oh, wow.
The peer-reviewed published version is out
Where can they
today.
go for that? Where can people grab that?
I can send you the link, but it's published through Footwear Science. So
Okay.
if they search Footwear Science, you can see it in the latest articles.
Send us a
that
link.
that
We'll put it in the
article will be
description.
paywalled unless they have access.
Oh,
But
okay.
you can still access the preprint that we released. So that's the
Okay.
nice thing about a preprint, is it's open access, that piece of it. So the paper, more or less, there's some stuff in the discussion that has shifted based on like what reviewers like or don't like, how you kind of explain things, but the data and the conclusions are the same as what you would have seen in the preprint. So
Gotcha.
So yeah, that's we at the time obtained the most recent shoes that were available. So when we had the RC ones there, the Endorphin Pro ones, those kind of fell in that mid sector, around 1.5% benefit. And then we looked at the Brooks Hyperion Elite 2 and the Hoka Rocket X, and those really didn't offer any substantial benefit, significant benefit relative to the control shoe.
Those, see,
No comment.
we don't need the the economy.
That's something
test for
your
it.
personal experience would validate that, I'm guessing.
This is what I love about it. Like, if anything, like, it would be really disheartening if we came up with wildly different, views that you're coming up with a test. I guess what my main question would be for you though is like, I'm guessing that some of the shoe brands have said, hey, we can send you shoes, but you don't want to have shoes provided by the manufacturers for testing?
So no, shoe companies don't really say, hey, we want to send you shoes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. That's, no, I'm not against taking like donations in kind. Really, anyone who's doing shoe research at some point has some conflict of interest. Like I don't yet. But if you look at anyone who's published shoe research, multiple articles of shoe research, they all have some conflict of interest,
Like even when companies like an independent lab confirmed like these findings, there's still a degree of
it's
level.
who's funding
Right.
at a certain point, Nike comes to somebody and says, we want to test this shoe. Here's some money. Can you test it? But the thing is that if it is, and here's where, again, I would think that you're studying a lab with, people on with the machines and the, testing the breathing and testing the economy. It's not like it can get biased. Like, it's not like if I really love Nikes and you put me on the treadmill with it, that I'm going to naturally run faster with less energy expense. Is it?
Right. Yeah. So that goes to kind of the nature of running economy testing. And so it's a submaximal physiological variable that we're testing, and it's not really dependent on like your subjective effort or your perceived effort. And so yeah, you wouldn't think that your kind of preconceived notion about the shoe or not being able to blind you to the shoe would have an impact on like the physiological response that we're measuring. Now, if I asked you to go do a time trial in this shoe versus that shoe, and you really thought this shoe's awesome and this shoe sucks, then that might impact your effort or how well you might think you might perform in the time trial, and that sort of expectancy might affect things. But
if you had my heart rate and my oxygen measured during that time trial, wouldn't you be able to see that I was maybe giving a less effort?
that would be something we could look at. if we were choosing to test like in a maximal manner. But for economy testing, it's got to be sub threshold anyway. So it's pretty manageable intensity, and I'm not even really focused on perceived effort when we're testing people in that way. It's just the physiological measures.
So when you do the tests, what are they running? Is it like an all-out effort, or like what are the parameters that you set for the athlete that's testing the shoes?
Yeah. So for economy testing, since we're measuring oxygen consumption as a means to determine your energy expenditure, we need to make sure that you are working like primarily aerobically. So if you go too hard and you start to have a greater contribution from like anaerobic metabolism, so think like above tempo pace, 5K pace, mile pace faster, you're going to have a larger contribution at that point, or an increasing contribution from anaerobic sources of energy. And so we can't strictly quantify your energy expenditure using oxygen consumption alone at that point. So in order to control for that, economy testing is always done like below your threshold, below lactate threshold. So think like slower than tempo pace. Right. So if I asked you to do like 8 by 5 minutes slower than your tempo pace with a 5-minute recovery, you'd feel like that'd be a pretty manageable workout, I bet.
Right.
And so that's what we're doing with economy testing. So it depends on what speed you want to test at. So like in our larger super shoot study, we tested at 6-minute mile pace. And so in order to make sure that our subjects can run tempo pace at like 6-minute mile pace or faster, we needed people who were like 1730 or so 5K runners to kind of translate that. And so we use some kind of like when I'm recruiting, I'll say, okay, this is the speed we want to test at. This would correspond to a threshold around this. This is the performance criteria that might correspond to that. And so we sort of recruit in that way from the start. And then there are some safeguards, like some checks that we look at, some different physiological markers we look at to make sure someone's actually below threshold during the testing.
How hard is it to find test subjects? Because I feel like that's a very specific range, especially with the shoe sizes maybe that you have.
I didn't even think about that. You got to match.
Yeah. Like I feel like it's hard enough just to find the right reviewers that we need to match shoe sizes and types and preferences. So how does that work for you?
It's tough. It depends on how fast you want to test first. So obviously, the faster you test, the more you limit the sample of people you can pull from. Mm-hmm. And then you have a restricted size range on top of that. I mean, that's why shoe research is hard to do. So people are like, why hasn't anyone done these super shoe comparisons before? It's like, well,
because I don't have 20 pairs of
size. Yeah, the cost of having a really wide run of shoes. And so yeah, that was a tough decision just when we were doing that initial study, deciding like, okay, what size run of shoes am I going to go for? Like, I talked to some buddies in the footwear industry and, running shoes specialty stores, like, should I do 10, 11, 10, 10 and a half, 11, 11, 11 and a half, 12? Like, and then you start thinking like convenient sample. It's like, okay, I know 5 guys from nearby who are at 10 and a half. So like, it's
the crazy thing though, when you start talking about sizes. So when they make the shoes, the usual sample size is 9 for men, 7 for women. And so when they're testing originally, when Nike goes out to test, say the Vaporfly originally when they first came out, I'm guessing that they're doing it at like a size 11. Like they didn't even come out with a size 12 for a long time. So I'm going to guess that the size of the shoe also makes a difference on the load in the plate and how the economy works. The bigger you go, I would think that there would be variance in just the difference between a size 9 and a size 12. There's probably a difference in how much energy return that shoe gets. And it would also, I guess, depend on the runner and how much leverage they could put on the plate if the, size 12 or whatever.
Yeah, so I'm sure that's something the shoe companies have to look at in development and their own internal testing. And I'm not sure what all they're doing there. In terms of like what I could speak to, I guess, is the published research that's out there. I think the one study that was done that wasn't on like a really small range of sizes was the Barnes and Kilding study. That was another independent study where they like confirmed the claims of the initial Nike Vaporfly prototype paper. And they did look at men and women in like a wider range of sizes, and both for men and women at those like speeds we previously talked about, those faster speeds, saw consistent benefit. So I think, whatever we can glean from that, it seemed like the shoe for the given individual, that shoe was doing its job.
That's cool.
Kind of across a wider range. I don't know the sizes off the top of my head, but I do know he had a wider range of sizes.
So it sounds really cool when you say the name of the report. was it Barnes and somebody or something?
Barnes and
Barnes and Kilding.
Barnes and Kilding. Is your name on your research?
Yeah, so that paper that just got published online today after going through peer review, that's out now.
What's my
name?
Do you have a person on with you, or is it just you?
Yeah, it's one of my students who helped collect data on the project and was involved with it. Pretty involved. So that's Joubert and Jones.
Joubert and Jones.
Nice.
I like it.
I'd buy something from that company.
The T is silent, people.
What I wanted to ask you was, are you just looking at strictly the percentage performance, or are you doing anything with the actual foam, the compression performance, or the energy that is returned from the foam?
The physical
exactly.
parts of the shoe?
Anything like that, or is it just strictly the athlete?
So I don't have access personally to any like the kind of engineering equipment that you would need to test like the shoe's compliance and resilience, because that's one of the things in the original Nike study that showed the 4% benefit of the Vaporfly prototype. They also showed that the shoe was more compliant, which basically means that it compresses more, it stores more energy, and then it's also more resilient, so it returns more energy. And that was like kind of the big thing with the PIBA foam and the ZoomX foam in that study.
Right.
And since then, the other shoe studies have mostly just been about economy. I'm collaborating with a colleague who does do mechanical testing and engineering testing like that to test some of the shoes that we had from that study. So that'll be really interesting to see, because it would be nice if you could just do mechanical testing on the shoes and say, okay, we can predict performance, the economy benefit of this shoe based on its mechanical principles, without having to round up all these people and do all this human testing.
Mm-hmm.
So that would play into a different question, I suppose, because one of the questions I wanted to ask you about was the illegal shoes. When you get up to the above 40 millimeter stack in the heel, that's not going to be your specialty. You'll be able to tell me if that shoe is less taxing on your economy, but you're not going to be able to say, okay, the reason why they went up to 40 millimeters, they felt like there was too much of that bounce back and it was creating too much of a advantage. Do you have any thoughts on some of these shoes? Like, we're going to see some shoes coming out, like already we have the Adidas Prime X, which is above the...
Like 50.
Yeah, and then I know New Balance has one coming out soon that for a person like us we're not going to be podium at New York City Marathon, we can go ahead and use those, but it technically, if we were a sponsored athlete, they would be illegal.
Yeah, I think without doing the testing, I'd say we don't know. So we need to get you in the lab in the 50 millimeter shoe and the 40 millimeter shoe and really see. And it'd be easy to tell you really quick,
I mean, and there has to be like a level at some point where it's a negative return, right?
Sure, yeah. So I think
the Prime X felt like that.
Yeah, if you just keep adding more and more foam, at some point you're not going to get any like extra benefit from the storage and energy return. You're just carrying around a heavier shoe,
right?
And so that's been the interesting thing about these new foams that are so compliant and resilient, is that you can, and they're lightweight, but you can get away with a heavier shoe because you're getting the kind of energy savings and returning benefits from it. But yeah, there's got to be diminishing return and kind of a flip at some point. And that might be different for different individuals. Like a larger body mass individual might benefit from that.
True, right.
Or someone running faster with like more ground reaction force maybe benefits from that larger spring. So there's some with some of that mechanical testing, they'll like show that like if the shoe bottoms out, if you bottom out the foam, then you're not getting like as much as you could out of it. So I could see in those instances like having a little more would be a good thing. But yeah, hard to say. I don't necessarily. I think those things will kind of be self-limiting, because, like you said, like you put this 50 millimeter shoe on, or let's go at extremes at 60 millimeters, and it's like, no, this doesn't work, right? And so I think some of those things will be self-limiting. Like when they look, even the World Athletics regulations. One of my colleagues, Jeff Burns at University of Michigan, who had like called for some of the regulations, and things got down to like the 40 millimeter limit, and part of that, I think his argument for that was just to like limit the amount of space you had to do new crazy stuff with. Like, so who knows what the next new engineering thing will be. And so it's like, if you just have a limited space to work with, it might not necessarily just be that like, oh, we're trying to prevent foam from being this thick. Cause like that,
I mean, we've seen that with the iPhone though. I mean, sooner or later you can pack a whole lot into the same space. But I mean, that brings up another question. Obviously, when you're testing people, just because they can hold a pace doesn't mean they have a certain body or physique, that matches. Are you finding that if someone can run that pace, regardless of weight or size, height, whatever, the economy is pretty much the same across the board?
I think that's one of like the big unanswered questions still. Most of the shoe studies that have been done are really trying to say like what percent benefit is this shoe relative to a control shoe or relative to this other shoe. They haven't really been designed to say like who are the big responders and who's the smaller responders. And we do see ranges of responsiveness, like going back to that original Vaporfly study, I think 4% was the average, but you saw a range of responses of probably like barely 2% up to like I think even 7-8%.
Wow.
And same thing in our study, we saw like our average was around 3%, but we had people in the Alphafly that got like no benefit because they really didn't like it. More people on the lower end were probably 1 to 2%, and then people up like 6%. So you get these range of responsiveness. So there is individual responsiveness. And so that's the tough thing to look at is like at that point you got a study that has enough people in it to make shoe to shoe comparisons, but you really don't have enough people in it to make person to person comparisons. So it's like when you're making shoe to shoe comparisons, it's like I'm comparing me to myself across these different shoes, or you to yourself across these different shoes, and it's easy to make conclusions that way. But if I want to compare you to Robbie, I need more you and Robbie's like in the study.
Right.
And so yeah, I think that's going to be something interesting going forward as like the kind of research builds in this area, which I think it's going to continue to. In our study, if I just looked at like the 6 highest responders to those top 3 shoes that we had, and the 6 lowest responders, those were still the best shoes for everybody. But if I looked at like who had the bigger responses versus the lower responses, we saw that the people who were least economical to begin with got more of the benefit. So if you have poor economy, the shoes are helping you more. They're helping you close the gap on your more economical peers. Which is kind of interesting because it's like you think of those big performance predictors, VO2 max, lactate threshold, and economy. It's like we're probably not changing much with VO2 max and lactate threshold with the shoes. And so if you were already really gifted in those areas, but economy was your weakness, that's kind of like it's helping you more than maybe someone who already was super economical.
Interesting.
So I'm kind of interested to see how like more of the long-term performance data plays out looking at that, if we can make comparisons among different like populations of people maybe.
So you're basically saying for the non-scientific people out there, if you kind of have poor running economy, but you put on a shoe like an Alphafly, it can actually help you more than somebody who has good running economy, and the shoe just helps a little bit more. What you said earlier, 1 to 2% still means 4 minutes or so over a marathon potentially, which, right now, if you think about Boston cutoff times, not this year because they let everybody in, but typically they run right around 4 minutes, 5 minutes. So that's a big deal.
Yeah, definitely. I think the benefits are to be had for a wide range of people, but I think that, like you said, the people are less economical to begin with. I think of it for myself now. Like, so I've been running for 20 plus years, and like I feel like my economy is bad now, and I have like no elasticity. I have like no elasticity or stiffness left in like my gastrocs and Achilles. It's just like I'm just pounding the ground. And so when I put like a shoe on that gives me more of those kind of elastic springy properties, I feel it feels amazing, So I could see potentially like someone who's really economical, young, has all that stiffness left in their their tendons in their feet, getting less benefit than someone who's older and aging and doesn't. Now obviously the speed, if you got to control for speed across those ranges, but yeah, I'm a high responder. I'm a high responder. Like if you look at my data compared to the overall study data, I'm a big responder to the Alphafly. So
I did want to ask you, when you're doing the studies, obviously we talked about all the super shoes, but what's the control shoe that you're using?
The ASICs.
Yeah, did you say that? Oh, I'm sorry, I might have missed that.
Yeah, for my lab, we're using the ASICs Hyperspeed, just because it's like a old school racing flat.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay.
It's cheap. It doesn't have a carbon plate. It uses standard EVA. It used to be worn by really fast people. Ryan
Right.
Hall's, I always call it the Ryan Hall special because that's Ryan Hall's a half
He's so
marathon
angry.
record
He's
shoe.
so angry about Alphafly.
Dude, he could be running
Not
58.
anymore. Yeah.
It is,
That is
man.
cool.
It's pretty insane how good that guy was, right?
Yeah.
The time he ran back in that era,
do you
and that
follow
hasn't
him
been
now?
touched since. Yeah. Oh
Okay.
yeah.
He's one of my favorite Instagram follows. I think he's just amazing.
He's a great. So as an exercise physiology professor, he's a great example of specificity of training. So
yeah,
Yeah, really.
I mean, went from being like lithe. Am I using
Yeah.
the right word?
Like,
yeah.
yeah.
To like Hulk like he's jacked.
yeah.
That's
Yeah.
crazy.
He's an impressive responder to training for sure. Whatever it is he's doing.
Oh, yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
So if you had to speculate what makes it more efficient for runners as far as the super shoes, carbon plate, P-Bax foam, is it one of those things? Is it the foam? Is it the combination of the plate giving you a propulsive element, or is it that it's able to save your legs for an entire marathon? I think I've seen several different hypotheses, even so far as the carbon plate doesn't really give you a spring so much as it helps stabilize that larger stack of foam to give you, a more, so that you can throw in 40 millimeters of foam for an entire 26 miles or whatever. So what, if you had to give your own kind of guess, what would you say it is?
Yeah, so when it comes to like the economy stuff that we've studied in the laboratory, it's over short windows of time. So it's less about the saving the leg stuff. Not to say there's not a benefit
Right.
for that when we can talk about that. But for like the lab testing that's been done, I think it's largely tied to like the increased compliance and resilience of the new midsole foams.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, I'm not a footwear design. You guys talk to footwear industry people, and so y'all know so much more that goes into the design of a running shoe and the overall geometry of the shoe and different factors that kind of have to mesh together. So I think that's the big new innovation is the foam. I think the plate, like you said, is probably important for like giving all of that squishy foam some stability.
Mm-hmm.
But the research that like just looks at plates alone, like in terms of increasing longitudinal bending stiffness in the shoe, that's a little more like wishy-washy on how useful that is in its own right.
And plates have
But
been
I think
around
the
for
foam-
a long time.
Yeah, in some form or fashion, people have played around with plates. And so, the shape of the plate, whether it's curved or flat, that is another element in like the geometry that probably needs to like all mesh together. But I think kind of the foam is the big innovation.
Yeah.
That's why I'm interested to see with the materials testing that we've got, see how that correlates with the actual economy benefits we saw. So, and then, yeah, to your question of like, outside of the economy benefits, definitely long-term in a race, if you have less muscle damage because your muscles didn't have to work as hard
Right.
over the course of the first 20 miles, then you're going to be better off, right? And so there's limited, Nike's Performance Lab had some like research abstract data from a conference where they showed some of that muscle damage data, where they had some blood markers of muscle damage after, I think it was like Portland Marathon or something, with people who had been in, like, I think it was the Vaporfly versus maybe Pegasus or something. Don't quote me on the exacts there.
Okay.
But they do have some data to show like markers of muscle damage were reduced in the new shoes, the advanced shoes compared to the traditional shoes, and that's probably consistent with what a lot of the anecdotal evidence people have experienced, that you're not blowing up as bad at, I've only run 2 marathons, but my last one that went a heck of a lot better than the first one. I was at mile 21, 22, and I was like, what's happening here? Like I don't know what's going on.
What were you wearing
Like,
for the first one?
things are still working. The first race I did in the Carbon X's, that's actually what started my whole endeavor into the shoe research, is that I had a pair of Carbon X's. That was my first carbon shoe. And I was like, oh, these are cool. I feel the stiffness and the rigidity of them. Like and I did my whole marathon build up in that. I raced in those. Didn't go well. And then I was about to buy the second pair of them, but I was like, I'm going to test myself in the lab. So that was my first case study test I did on shoes. I actually compared the Carbon X's to like my old Tracer 2 flats that I had from Hoka, and they were both the exact same.
Wow.
And so I was like, all right, well, let's buy some Alphaflies. They were like available at the time. This is like a little over a year ago. and I got the Alphaflys in, and before taking them out on the roads, I tested them, and I was like, oh, it turns out I'm not just a non-responder. I actually am a big responder.
Yeah.
It's just there's differences in these shoes, and so that was like the first thing. I was like, man, if this is this different here, and people are all this chatter about what shoes are best, I was like, let's try to get some money and like buy as many shoes as we can. So that's what started everything, actually.
And for our audience, this is a doctor. Dustin Joubert is Dr. Dustin Joubert.
He's a doctor of science.
You just heard, if you need Alphaflys, you should get them.
He's giving you a free pass.
Yeah, there's a prescription. You should write prescriptions for Alphaflys. People will love you.
Yeah. I'm one of those fake PhD doctors, though. So.
Yeah. We'll take it.
Yeah.
Anything to validate the obsession.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's a no-brainer for me. That shoe is well worth the money.
Well, it's funny because the other debate is people see people like our friend Ili Kipchoge choosing the Vaporfly over the Alphafly for a race. And again, what our conjecture is that he's making moves, he's changing paces, he's, not setting in, like, our goal in a marathon is to find the perfect pace and roll all the way to the finish in that perfect pace. Maybe pick it up a little bit towards the end. But when you're racing and you have to cover moves and, change up your gear to drop people or to bring people back in, I think that the Alphafly is not as responsive in those particular cases as maybe the Vaporfly. And that's why I would think that why a pro might choose the Vaporfly over the Alphafly from time to time. But I believe in my heart that the Alphafly is the better economy shoe.
Yeah, so I would say if the Alphafly is the better economy shoe for that individual, it's probably the better economy shoe across a decent range of racing speeds to where it could probably handle those changes in paces. I'm 4.5% in the Alphafly, I'm 3% in the Vaporfly, and I'm gonna run an Alphafly from everything a mile and longer because of that. But I do think that's a really interesting question. Is like all the pros in Vaporflies and very few in Alphaflies, which is interesting though, because when you look at the women's field, there's a lot more women who are wearing Alphaflies. And of course Kipchoge, his sub 2 is actually in the Alphafly.
Yeah,
right. I would say one, we don't have enough. We really don't have any research data on really fast guys in the Alphafly. All the previous lit is just in the Vaporfly line, and they've gone up to 5:20 pace in those studies. Mm-hmm. But our study is the first one that has the Alphafly in the lineup that's tested, and we only tested up to 6-minute pace. Okay. And so the Alphafly was similar to Vaporfly, but it was a little bit better, like just in terms of numbers, not statistical significance. But when you look at like individual responders, we have some people who are good 1.5-2% better in the Alphafly versus the Vaporfly. You don't see that in the reverse.
Okay.
Like you don't see people who are like really monster responders in the Vaporfly. So I think for those people who are big Alphafly responders, like that's the go-to shoe. And so like I'm one of those people, and so it's that makes it a no-brainer for me. But that might not be the case for a lot of the elites who are wearing it. They might be very similar, or they might be a little better in the Vaporfly. And I think when you start to consider it that way, it's like, okay, what shoe just feels more like natural and is less wonky? And it's probably the Vaporfly. Which shoe, after like having it on your foot for 20 minutes or 20 miles, feels like less restrictive or less like stuck in this one movement pattern? Yeah. Maybe that's the Vaporfly. So I could see that. But I think the speed thing might matter too. Maybe at the much faster speeds that they're running. That is better for their mechanics.
Okay, that's fair.
I always think back. I think to Rupp. Rupp's one of the few top pros who wears the Alphafly, and I gotta think he's got his own lab testing data. Right. That's he's always been over all the science of the sports stuff. So I gotta think he's got his own lab testing data that like validates he should be wearing those.
This might be a weird. I just thought of this, but this might be a weird, not conspiracy theory, hypothesis. I wonder if there's any thought going into a major marathon, if you're wearing the Alphaflies, the very slight off chance that you could pop a bubble mid-race, and that would like sway someone's opinion.
I've heard some people like conjecture that on like the Instagram shoe guys, but I don't. It doesn't, like on clean roads in a major city.
I'm going to put it on the Reddit conspiracy threads board to see what happens.
Never happen, but Megan, our Megan, was running in her first pair of Alphaflies, and stepped on a nail and drove it right through her pod. Now, Nike was nice enough to send her a new pair, but
If it happens 1 out of every 100 runs, and
You know what, though?
and that one run is during a major marathon, you'd be so pissed.
no, because here's the weird thing about it. I don't think you can feel. It's got those tensile fibers in there. I don't know how much you're going to feel the air loss.
Okay, next test. You need to
So
pop
so we
those
did
pods.
this test. I don't know
Did
if you
you?
guys saw those results. So
No, I think
I did see the
airbags.
picture that you popped. I didn't see the results.
So yeah, so I, from time to time I've asked people like, "Oh, what do you want me to test next?" And we joked about a popped pair of airbags. And so a dude sent me a pair of size. I always joke, if everybody sends me a pair of size 10, I'll test whatever. So he sent me a pair of size 10s, and he said, "Here, you can pop these. They're old." And so we popped a pair. And now I did all 4 airbags, so it wasn't like if you deflated one,
Okay.
that would probably feel a little like
Wonky.
Yeah. So I did all 4. And my thought was not like, okay, this is like, I would really consider running in these. It was more like, what does this element of the shoe contribute
Right.
to like its economy benefit? So I compared those to my like intact new version, and it was still like 3% benefit, or like upper 2s compared to like the 4.5.
So it was still like a 3. You said it was still like a 3% benefit.
Yeah, with the popped airbag.
With the popped
So if
airbags.
they did pop
See,
in a
I knew
race,
it.
I would just keep rolling.
I should come to work for you.
Or if they felt too wonky, just you could have a safety pin and pop the other 3, and then
So-
you'd be
all right.
level.
See,
That's smart.
All right.
You'd have your safety pin on you with your bib.
okay, but to me then the popped airbags are just a window dress, or the airbags at that point are just window dressing.
Well, no,
Like-
I mean I lost a good percentage and a half benefit there. So
Oh, 'cause you
so
were
that
saying-
element
okay,
of the
yeah,
shoe.
you're saying it's like
Now you could ask the question of like, what if there was just foam there?
Right.
And I didn't have this empty space there. Like I probably wouldn't lose as large of a amount. It might be even smaller. So
what's gonna
so
be
yeah, I
interesting-
can't really say.
What's going to be interesting is the
um,
new Alphafly has a little bit of foam between the pod and the outsole. So you're going to have another layer of protection.
Yeah.
For that. It just seems like such a small chance that you're going to pop one of those bags. I am surprised some guy sent his into you, because I can't it's the one shoe I can't let go of. Like I like those are my race shoes, and so they have memories.
he sleeps with them at night.
I do.
There probably is someone out there who sleeps with their alpha.
I guarantee it. When you were a little kid, when you got a new pair of shoes, you didn't put them up on your dresser
Yeah.
so you could see them like first thing and last thing when you're going to bed. I don't know.
I do hide the Alphaflies from my 3-year-old and my dog, so they
There
stay
you
on
go.
the upper shelf.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably one of the more valuable things that you own.
What's your 3-year-old's pace?
Yeah.
I don't know. She's working on it.
Okay. Yeah, they need to make, dude. If they made baby alpha flies, those things would sell. People would buy them.
Especially if they lit up.
Oh,
the
like
bubbles.
LA lights.
Yeah, like they lit
Alpha.
up. People love it.
Definitely. The shoe geeks would be all over it.
Yeah.
Well, this is fascinating. I think people are going to really get a kick out of listening to this. I think that I think we can maybe start to wrap it up
Yeah,
a little
sure.
bit here. One thing we'd like to ask is what is your favorite running shoe? And I think I know what it is. But how about when you're not racing? What's your favorite daily trainer?
Yeah. So I went through 4 pairs of the 1080 V10s.
Yeah.
All right.
I think that's the right version. What is it? The 11s are out now, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
12s are coming. Yeah.
And the 12s are about to be released. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the 10s, I went through 4 pairs of those. So I guess that means I like them quite a
Yeah,
bit.
and the 11 is pretty similar to the.
Yeah. I got a pair of the 11s finally now, and I feel like they're pretty darn close. No, I'm kind of boring when it comes to trainers. Like I don't go through a bunch of training shoes. One, I don't run a ton of mileage, but if something works for me, I just stay in it until they change some piece of it that makes me upset, and then I go somewhere new. But yeah, before that, I ran in the Bondies forever. I like the Bondies a lot, but I've got
you're a comfort guy.
bursitis, I've got heel bursitis issues, and so just a small tweak in something in like the heel counter or the collar can irritate
drive
that
you
back of
nuts.
my heel. Yeah. So I kind of have to be careful about that. That's why I like the kind of the flare and the dimple on that 1080.
Gotcha.
All right. And what's your favorite Will Ferrell movie?
Favorite? Got to be me and my old roommates back in graduate school can quote like every line from Step Brothers. So
All right, there we go. I told you I didn't want salmon. Said it 4 times.
I think that's Thomas. Is that your favorite one, Thomas?
It's up there.
Gotcha.
It's up there, Dale.
All right. Well, yeah. Thanks for everything that you do and posting all your information, sharing it on your Instagram. It's always interesting to see.
Yeah, big fans of what you're doing. It's kind of interesting because I'm not scientific. I'm more like emotional, and so all of my shoe reviews are fed off of emotion and how I feel running them, and just I've run in so many shoes now that I think I have an idea of what works and what doesn't work. But it's really interesting to see like someone take it to that next level and be like, no, this is actual working for people, and here's why it's working. So I think it's also great for the industry to know that, hey, if you are going to spend the money and you do want a performance benefit, there's a chance you are actually getting a performance benefit out of it. Unlike we don't know about vitamins or CBD, just throwing that
puts
stuff.
me to sleep. I don't know about the rest. Yeah, if you want to buy your way to Boston, you can do it.
I don't think that's fair. I'm still not there.
Yeah.
But yeah.
You can buy your way into getting closer to and destroying your dreams even more.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, Dustin, thanks a lot for coming on, and hopefully we get to talk again soon.
Sure thing. Thanks, guys.